This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze, your journey through life. And we are on a journey. Um, Everyone is. And no matter how much you try to get out of your journey, you're still going to have the ups and downs. And I think we all know that. And your journey isn't any less than somebody else's. But sometimes when we hear how somebody else is living their life, sometimes it rings a bell and we say, maybe I can do that too. My guest today is James Walters. And what I really focus on when I read James' bio is that he's into photography. And behind you, we see a lot of empty picture frames. And I'm wondering if there's a message behind that. So, James, welcome to Avoid the Maze.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so happy to be here.
So, tell me about those empty picture frames first.
Yeah, those are in progress and they are about to be. I love gallery walls. I have in my living room, I have a huge gallery wall of all of my kids and my adventures together. And so, really, what's behind me is the wall that is going to be my adventures in creativity. And so I've got three prints. One came in yesterday. It's right behind me, but you can't see it, and it's going in soon. But it's from a book cover of a book I've written. And my daughter, I think it's right about there. She wrote a book. She's 16, but she wrote a children's book recently. And there's one going in one of those empty frames to celebrate that. So
Oh, wonderful. So, obviously, you have a very creative family. So, it didn't stop with your genes, which I think is very, very exciting. I grew up in a home where my father, my grandfather, my father were writers, not by profession, but they wrote for everyone. My brothers followed in their footsteps. When I tried, I remember my father one day saying to me, leave the writing to your brothers and not me.
cool.
And I looked at him and I said, well, what's wrong with what I'm writing? And he goes, well, you may not want to share it with too many people.
Huh.
And I stopped writing.
Oh no.
Interestingly enough, the day that my father passed away, I wrote his eulogy. And when I got up and I read it, everybody was like totally amazed. Like, where did this come from?
Mm.
And I realized that my father's comment to me sort of had shattered me, but I knew that I had to prove myself. And that was the day. And that's when writing became so exciting to me. But you tell stories through pictures, through photography. So, how did this all start?
Yeah, I've always loved the visual arts, even from a young age. And interestingly, I grew up in a family. My both of my grandfathers were engineers, so there was not. They were creative, and I learned a lot of creative problem solving. But as far as art and things of that nature, it wasn't around me all the time. But I guess it was around in those high school years where you're exploring a lot of different concepts and turning them over in your head. And of course, that's around the time in my high school anyway, where I was able to go into a photography class, the kind with the dark room and all the chemicals and yeah. And so that sort of got it for me. And I hear that from a lot of people where they just a fascination with seeing that image show up in the tray all
Right.
of a sudden. And lucky to the people who got that experience. A lot of kids don't anymore, and it was super fun while it lasted. But what really got me into making stories with pictures is the fact that I could create a whole world that did not exist before just through the lens. And it didn't take me long to realize that I could be standing beside someone and they could be looking at something in the distance or something up close, and I could be looking at it too. But we both saw it so differently.
Exactly.
And if I gave them a camera to take a picture of it, and I took a picture of it, we would come out with two different things, even though we're looking at the same thing at the same time. We're in the same space, but we're just coming to it from a completely different perspective. And that's what's fascinated me for the last 30 years.
That's interesting because as I told you before we came on air, my husband had a fascination with photography the same way you did. He had a darkroom when he was growing up. And he said it that's what's exciting to him, like you said. He'd go out, he'd take pictures, he'd come back, had no idea if anything had really taken. And there in the tray, he would start to see, oh my God, that's what I saw. That is incredible. And when I met him, I only knew of, a little Kodak snap and shoot type camera. And he said to me one day, here, you're going to take this camera. I'm going to take mine. And we're going to go out into the park and take pictures. And I thought, oh, this is fun. But I would look through the lens and I had no idea what I was supposed to take a picture of.
Hmm.
And so I did basically what you said. When he went to take a picture of something, I followed behind him and took the same picture. When it comes to nature, he can take pictures. Mine just look like grass or a flower, nothing exciting. However, we started doing wedding photography.
Hmm.
I could capture the essence of individuals, whereas his were just, oh, this is a picture of the bride. And so you're so correct that you can look at the exact same thing, have your camera focus exactly the same way, but you're all both going to get something totally different from each other.
Very much.
So you had a dark room, you got to see these images blossom in front of you. But now we're doing digital. There's very little film around.
Right.
Although my husband did read an article that Fuji is trying to push film again to come back so that people can take, as they said, real pictures, which is going to insult a lot of people who walk around with their iPhone, and think that they're taking real pictures. But how was that transition for you?
I was really fortunate in my timing. I guess I was really fortunate in my parents' timing because I didn't choose to be born, I guess. But I was born at a time where I was in college right in the middle of this whole transition between film and digital. And it was commercially, I would say it was right around the early 90s, mid 90s. And that's when I was in school. I decided to go into college to learn about photography, and I got a degree in commercial photography. And at that time, there wasn't a whole lot to know. There was Photoshop. I think it was 1.0, 2.0, something like that. And we were still scanning in film on a flatbed scanner, and then we could do a couple of things with it on the computer. And I was really nervous about learning this new skill. And I told my instructor, I said, I'm just starting out here. And he looked at me puzzled. He's like, look, you're just starting out here, but even people who have been a photographer for 20, 30 years, they're just starting out here now too, because it's a whole different playground. Right. And so you're really on the same playing field in some ways. And that gave me a little bit of confidence. And so I went in to my career, and I did start to see that was the transition when people who had been doing it for a long time and did not want to learn a new skill, they started retiring early. They fell away. They just found something else to do, maybe. And people who were willing to embrace it, oh, it was the Wild West. We stumbled through. I mean, everything was expensive. Everything was cumbersome and crashed and wasn't super reliable. And the quality was suspicious at best some days. But we kept going. And now it's just everything everyone knows. And and the thing about film coming back, it's always kind of been there. It's always been for the people who wanted to express their artist side. But sadly, everyone, if you unless you're doing it in a home dark room with black and white film and that kind of thing. But if you shoot color film right now, you're sending it to a lab. They're developing that, scanning it in, and they're
Right.
sending you the files to download. So it's
The interesting part with labs, we started doing, like I said, wedding photography. And we would come home and we would post all of our pictures online. And then we would either print for the bride or she would just take it and have it printed somewhere else. And the interesting part was she'd come back and they'd say to us, you know, I had this printed somewhere and I don't like the color, but the way you printed it, the color changed. And it was like, well, different printers, different ink. And then we found a lab and we said, well, this is a really good lab. They're out of New York. They've been doing photography for years. So let's try sending it out there. And we sent that exact same picture. And it was like, no, we like yours better.
mm,
But the problem was that even our printer was not always consistent. And so that was the downfall for my husband because, he said that he could tweak things in the dark room, but he was, yes, he can go into Photoshop and do some tweaking, but even in the early days, Photoshop was minimal at what it would do. Today, yes, you can do a lot more, but there's a lot more learning curve as well. So you started out in commercial photography. Tell our listeners what commercial photography really is, because to me, it means, oh, there's a storefront. I'm going to go take a picture of it and they're going to use it in an ad. But it's
yeah,
more than that.
it's a lot more than that. And I was super fortunate in when I left school, I started working for a commercial studio. And you don't think about it all the time, but I mean, every time you see a photograph, someone had to take it. Someone took the time to get behind a camera and set up whatever's in front of that. And they made that photograph happen. And so in commercial photography, I worked for a studio that we primarily photograph small products, like anything you would have seen in a grocery store ad, a drugstore ad, a catalog back in those days. And this studio was large. It was over 250,000 square feet. It was a big place. It was like a little mini Hollywood. We had set after set. There were rooms. We had carpenters on staff. It was a big production to create catalogs and these photographs. And I got to photograph everything from race car drivers to hardware for hardware stores to bedding for stores like Macy's and things like that to lingerie for clothing companies like Hanes and Champion, just some of the names. And every day was a little bit different. I would come to the same place and I would tell different stories for different companies. And the story I was telling is, hey, this is an item we have that we think will benefit you, the consumer. And this is how we would propose you use it. And the whole thing about commercial photography, advertising photography, is we do have all of those props. We've got the carpenters, we've got the painters on staff to give the mood of the place. Sometimes we bring in models so that we can show the consumer, hey, this is the type of person who can use it. Are they artsy? Are they down to earth looking? All of this is through that visual storytelling medium. And we're so meticulous. So much goes into every little bit of a commercial image you see. And then at the end of the process, it's supposed to look like it happened by accident. So that's where the real magic happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So most of us have no idea all the people involved in commercial photography. Again, we think, oh, I can do it. the guy down the street wants me to, I'll take my camera and I'll take a couple pictures of something and then say, here, put it online. But you are correct. When you look at true commercial photography, it is telling a story. And you talk about that in your bio. And you also talk about that your artistry is your movie of life. So, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I one day, so just backing up just a little bit, going from photography school, went into my first photography job, and I was just kind of loving life, floating through life as a young 20-year-old kid, didn't know anything, but was having a blast. Uh, and then life just kept happening as it does. And there got to be a point in my almost 40s where a lot of things just weren't going great. They weren't happening to me directly, but family situations and things that we have no control of. And so I really had to start to pay attention more about my life. And I realized that I had spent a good decade and a half, almost 2 decades, just kind of floating through life and not really, I mean, things were good enough until they weren't. And I had to figure out, okay, now what do I do? Because I'm not happy. The people around me are not happy. And I had, as much of a visual person as I was, I realized that I was not a movie watcher. And I think that right around that time, I also discovered through going to a therapist that I had ADHD. They said, do you think you might have ADD? And I was like, that's not even a real thing. That's the thing the kids had in the 80s to give them an excuse to misbehave, right? And she was like, no, sir, it is not. And she asked me a few questions, and my answers to those questions, she said, you might want to look into this. And so that informed me why maybe I don't sit through movies very often, even if they're interesting. So that was the period of my life when I started really watching movies, and I became fascinated. And I realized that every single movie, as amazing or as quirky or as horrific or whatever it is, it came from an idea that the writer had. And then the writer wrote out that idea. And then some other people got together and they said, okay, how do we take these words and make some images out of these words? And so that all came together in my mind to give me this thought that, oh, what would happen? What would happen if I took my life and I wrote a script of how I would like to see it happen in the next 6 months, and some people simplify this and call it goals. And
Sure.
that's valid. I've got no problem with that. But I started thinking, what would happen if I started narrating my own life just a little ahead of its time? How could I live into that? Because sometimes you have to ad lib, but every movie has a script and every play has a script. Everything that you've ever seen that is worth watching has had a script
Sure.
to it. And even weddings, like you mentioned,
Yep.
I
Right.
photographed weddings for quite a while, and I actually wrote a book about my experiences with that. But I relate weddings to a theatrical production where you got the wardrobe, you've got the audience, you've got the cast and crew, you got the people backstage, and you've got the script, you've got all of those things, and you've got a group of unprofessional actors who have only rehearsed it one time before opening night.
Right.
So it's there can be a lot of comedy there in that. But again, there's a script to that. So that's where I really came up with the being the author of your own story concept that I talk about quite a bit.
Well, as a life coach, one of the things that I did personally before I actually jumped into coaching, I had had my coaching certificate. I have a degree in communications, but I realized that I had to make changes and I had to understand the changes that I was making and why I wasn't, am I changing for myself? Am I changing for my spouse? Am I changing because of the season? And at first it was very difficult. And then basically, like you're talking about, I said, okay, where do I want to be tomorrow? And all those tomorrows after. And I realized that we all do this in the back of our mind, but we don't all play it out. And if we did, I think most of us would feel more successful at the end of each day rather than I didn't get anything accomplished today, or I
Right.
worked for 14 hours and I'm not appreciated today, or whatever those thoughts are that go through our heads. But if you can start to plan, and I don't care, like you said, make it a script, make it your goals, make it something that you can look at and say, this is where I am. This is where I want to be. Or you know what? I thought I wanted to be here, but I need to pivot
Mm,
because this
very
isn't
much.
really where I want to be. And I think when you're in the artistic world like you are, sometimes it seems easier to do that. Um, Whereas maybe if you were working a 9 to 5 job, and I use this as an use this yesterday, so no offense to accountants out there, but I said, but if you're an accountant and your day is every day looking at figures and adding figures up and trying to decide, is there money, isn't there money, how do we mix this up, that might get boring for some people. And you say, but this isn't where I want to be, but I don't have a choice, I have to be here. And my comment is, no, you may have to keep doing what you're doing, but you can find time for that creative side of yourself. You can find time to say, where I want to be tomorrow is here. So I need to take that step. That's what I did a little over 10 years ago. I didn't think I could do it. I figured, hey, I've tried so many things. My husband, like I said, my husband and I had a side hustle. We were doing weddings. I thought, oh, I'm going to do this till the end of my life. Until the last wedding that we did, we both looked at each other and said, this isn't for us anymore.
Yeah.
We were working 10,
It,
12-hour days for a wedding. And it was like, I can't charge enough.
it's a high burnout thing for sure.
And of course, there's Uncle Bill with his cell phone taking pictures, and they're going to have those pictures immediately before they
Mm.
have mine. So you're now writing your script for your life. So what does your movie look like 5 years from now?
Oh, 5 years from now, w- I wanted to say one thing about writing the script is that's fun if you choose to see it that way because it's always a choice. But whenever you're writing the script, just know that it's not going to survive contact with real life.
Right.
That's just how it goes. Even actors are going to ad lib or that kind of thing. So whenever life throws you a curveball, you can just scream out plot twist and just know that's going to happen. There's going to be a plot twist. You can't write everything about it. But as far as 5 years for me, I have a daughter, I have a son. He's in college now, but I have a daughter who is 2 years away from graduating high school, and so that's in 2 years. About 3 years, we'll get her settled in. So 5 years for me, oh boy, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about van life. I don't know if that's for me, but just getting out there and seeing the world and mostly the U.S. I've seen a lot of parts of the world, but driving around the U.S., I think that would be fun. And that is so right now, I think 5 years from now is going to be really integrating work and play for me. And I've been slowly getting there. I've got my work to where I've got all my systems pretty tight and it's pretty repeatable and reliable. And as I save time, I've started building in time for my passion projects, one of which is a podcast that I host. It's called A Joyful Rebellion. And it's about it's about figuring out what is next. When you come to that time in your life where you realize, I need to be more me, I need more life out of life. And so I've been doing that, but I see just that expanding in the next 5 years for me.
And that is so important. I realized it even more so. I joined two groups on Facebook. I wasn't going to at first, but I started reading some of the articles. One is called the Ethel Circle, and it's made up of women through AARP in their ages anywhere from 45 to 90.
Mm,
And what I'm hearing from so many women specifically is I'm not where I thought I was going to be.
mm,
I thought getting married, having kids, having a career, I was going to be happy. Well, not that I'm unhappy, but there's something missing. And they
hmm.
think they can't go out and get that. And my comment is, I believe that until I was 55 years old. And at 55 years old, I realized, hey, I'm doing what I like to do. How can I keep doing this? And I will admit that what I love doing um, hit me in the butt, and I was kicked out of corporate America basically because I just didn't fit their mold.
Mm.
But I took all that with me.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. But I took all that with me and said, my life isn't ending, and it's not going to be that easy for me to get a job that I want. Okay. Sure, I can get a job. I can work in a lot of different places, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And when I sat down with my husband and my son and sort of apologized that my income was going away, they
Mm.
looked at me and they said, okay, what do you want to do next? And when I told them over 10 years ago, I wanted a podcast, they looked at me and said, so do it. And I said,
Wait a minute. Wait, you're
I,
supposed to
yeah, I said,
push
I
back
don't
here.
like, what do I need? And my husband said, well, we'll figure it out. He's an IT person. And initially, the way I started out was not an easy task. I had him doing edits because I didn't know what to do in a conversation to keep it going. Yes, I'm a communication major, but this is live or almost live. Um, but I realized if I could do it, anybody can. Okay, but you have to want to. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you that, you know, you've been planning, you've been planning this in your head, maybe not knowing exactly how it was going to play off. But if I keep working what I'm working and I customize it so at some point I can do something else, that is a huge benefit and it makes my life better.
Absolutely. And the one of the big things that I learned through a period of time in my life where I really was searching and I thought I was doing personal growth, really what I was doing is just exploration and I guess delaying what I really needed to learn by reading a lot of books on personal growth and specifically happiness. And I think a lot of times people get to a place in their lives where maybe they're unhappy. I know I did because of the circumstances around me. And you feel like you're unhappy because of those circumstances and you want something to change. And I know for me and so many people I talk to on my podcast, the circumstances don't change until they do. And you can and I can look at somewhere I want to be. I can write this script and say, hey, I want to be in XYZ place in my life in a certain amount of time. But then I have to ask the question to myself, okay, who do I need to become in order to get there? Because who I am now has me right here. And that's okay, but obviously I want more for myself. So who do I need to become to get there? And that's really what the scripting is about, because I mean, you could, I guess, write, hey, the script, I win the lottery on Thursday and I buy the island in the Bahamas by next Wednesday, and that'd be great. But I don't know that the universe just brings you those things, right? The
You
universe
know,
is pretty cool, but I don't think it's
yeah,
that cool.
you know, I'm so glad that you brought up a scenario like that because I was getting myself upset for the last year because every time I would get on Facebook, there was always some coach that was out there saying, if you're not making six figures by now, or if you're not able to take that Hawaiian vacation, and I kept thinking, come on, I know this is a gimmick. You're trying to sell me something, which is fine. Okay. I'm not going to fall for what you're selling me. Okay. But yes, I can be more successful, but I have to create success that means something to me. That may come in dollars, that may come in, buying a bigger house, you know, going vanning, whatever that is. But I have to choose it. Okay. I can't let somebody out there say to me, Karen, you're not successful at coaching because you're not making six figures. So I met with a gentleman about a month ago, and he said to me, so where do you want to be a year from now? I said, I'd like to have maybe another 20% in my coaching business. Didn't say it in dollars. I meant
Mm.
20% more clients. He said, well, how much do you want to make? I said, everybody wants to make millions, but I don't want to talk about it in that sense. I want to figure out how to grow my presence and have people want to work with me. And at first, it was like, no, we don't do that. We look at how much you're making today and how much.
Oh, yeah.
Said, I won't grow that way because what it will happen is I'll be thinking about the money, not my coaching, not my podcasting. We hung up. He called me a couple of days later and he said, I like your approach. I think we're going to change our business model. He said, because you're right. You aren't going to make six figures in 6 months. You're probably not going to make it in a year. Could you get there? Yes. He said, but the variables that you would need, I'm not sure you want to put that into it. I said,
Mm.
I don't. I'm not going to say it's my last hurrah, but it's my hurrah. Okay. That's what I hear you saying about 5 years from now, that
That
you're going to go have fun. Okay. And it's not about, you might have fun and you might make millions doing it with your photography or podcasting, but that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you want to explore more.
it is. And I am a big proponent of having great stories. They can be awful hard times and still be great stories because someone might be able to learn from them. I'm working my book right now. It's actually, I've titled it Ouch. And it's just all the stories that, boy, I wish I'd known that before. And also some of them are, yeah, I knew that would end badly, but I thought I'm a special person and it didn't, the rules don't apply to me. So, you find out.
And and there's nothing wrong with that. It
Hmm.
was a learning experience. Okay. Um, I remember when I was going through a divorce many, many years ago. First thing my mother said to me, my mother did not like my first husband. And the first thing she said to me, though, was, what did you do wrong?
Oh,
And that really, really burned. But
yeah.
today, I'm glad she asked me that because I realized what I did wrong. Neither one of us, we thought we were in love with each other, but we were looking for something to please our families.
Mm.
We happened to come along at the right time. Our families didn't like each other. It, I mean, the 7 years we were together was probably the toughest 7 years of my whole life.
Mm.
And I hated him afterwards until I realized I can't live with hate. He had to figure out a way to turn that hate into something more positive. And then once I did, it was like I could look back and go, I know why we got together. I know why we stayed together for the 7 years. And all the things I learned from that helped me in my second marriage. And we just celebrated 40 years together.
Wow.
So, when we say, I knew that I shouldn't have done it, we didn't know at the time. We were doing what we needed to do at that moment in time. But if you can learn from it, it makes the future so much better. And once I could get rid of the anger and the hate and realize this is as much on me as it was on him.
Mm.
Okay. You know what? Life looks so much more beautiful. And the funny thing is, we both remarried within 30 days of each other. So,
Wow.
I mean, he went on with his life, I went on
Yeah.
with my life. And, you know, but there are still some people today who sit back and go, oh, this happened to me 40 years ago. My whole life is a mess. We have the choice.
Yeah. We've
And,
got agency.
and that's what I think that you're hearing in the stories that you share is that there's always a choice.
There is always a choice, and that's a slippery slope when I get into talking with people who do have thoughts about things that have happened in the past. Maybe they happened to them, maybe they didn't, but in some way they feel it affects them. And one of the things I've been learning more and more about the philosophy of Stoicism in the last 10, 15 years. And I love it. It's not a religion, it's just a philosophy, ancient Greek and Roman to some degree. But one of the tenets is that you only have control over your thoughts and your response to something. You don't have control over your health. You don't have control over your body in a lot of ways. You don't have control over another person's opinion of you. You don't have control over your reputation. And there are so many things that if you think about it, you don't have control over. It could make you feel helpless. But if you realize you don't have control over it, it's actually pretty empowering because okay, the next thing you do or decide to do, well, no, I take that back. The next thing you decide to do is only valid if you do it.
Yeah, it's true.
But the next thing you actually do, that's on you. And whether you can do it, whether you can accomplish it or not, again, that's out of your control. But if you choose to do it, if you choose to go at least extend an olive branch to repair a relationship, for example, now you can't control whether that person accepts your apology or, the gesture, but you can initiate it and at least like you said, you had to make the conscious choice to let go of your hate, your animosity, all of those things for your own self-preservation. So that was your choice. And then you did
Absolutely.
it and you were in control of that. You couldn't give that control up to anyone else and expect it to happen.
Exactly. And in my case, I lucked out because he also went through growth in his life and his marriage and uh, just like out of the blue, I won't say that we're best friends, but I can still send him a birthday message. If I were to run into him, it would be pleasant. So neither one of us held on to the anger that we
Hmm.
had, but we didn't tell each other that we were doing that, which I think is
Yeah.
even more remarkable. But you're right. We, our thoughts, take us to where we're going to go next. And we have a choice of what to think. Um, and I didn't realize that for a long time. I always thought, my choices were, based on my husband, my parents, my teachers, or whoever was talking to me at the time. I thought, oh, I don't have a choice. I've got to listen to them. The reality of is I can listen to them, but then I can make the choice what is best for me at that moment in time and know that there could be consequences. And
For
that's
sure. Yeah. And
okay.
I want to make it clear because sometimes I've had people sort of get it twisted about you're in control of your thoughts. You're not in control of your feelings. So if someone says, "Oh, but I feel really anxious or I feel really scared or I'm nervous in these situations," okay, you have no control over that. That's your body's response to outside things, but you can have control over your thoughts. Just ask yourself, okay, am I in danger? I feel really nervous right now. I'm in a room full of people I know who are trying to make small talk with me. I'm an introvert and my heart's racing, but am I in danger? Okay, so you check that off the box. And then you just sort of go through the list. And these are your thoughts that you do have control over. And then maybe you can talk yourself off the ledge. Maybe you can't. But sometimes when I do get into these conversations, someone hears or they say, well, they start listing all the thoughts they don't have control over. I'm like, okay, but you can rein that in. You can still, otherwise medication usually gets involved in
That's right.
other professionals and straight jackets and things. So,
So how can my listeners find you, follow you, and get your books?
oh yeah, the best way, everything I've consolidated on my website, which is jameswalters.com. So the podcast link is there. And the podcast is probably the best way to connect with the material that I do most recently. I launch one every week. And I talk to people who have either been through their own joyful rebellion in their life or professionals like you who help others through their own joyful rebellion. And do that once a week. But the books are there and all the information on upcoming projects are there as well.
Well, I hope to follow you when you get in that van and you travel the United States. Uh, you will make my husband and I envious, but my husband and I realize that after an hour or two on the road, we're done for the day. And so we wouldn't get very far. So
Right.
we dream about it, but unless somebody's going to take over the driving, we're going to stay home and enjoy each other at
You
home.
never know. A couple of years from now, there might be self-driving RVs. Wouldn't
That's
that be
true.
cool?
That would be very cool. Thank you, James, for joining me today and have a great day.
Thank you. It was so fun. Goodbye.